The original 5D. This review went nothing like I expected at all. So whenever I make my videos, I normally have a plan in mind for how it's generally going to go. Whatever the product, I normally already have a general rough draft in my head as soon as I purchase the item, because spending thousands of dollars on things to make videos on blindly really isn't a great financial investment. And so far, this has been the only item I had to completely rethink the video I was making because the camera was just so far from what I thought it would be. So let's just start from the beginning then. With this camera, as all cameras I buy, I sat by the window, waiting for the mailman to come and chuck my expensive unnecessary purchase as hard as he can into my yard. As soon as I either see it hit my doorstep or hear it land on my roof, I run outside, and the first thing I do, as any photographer should, is take a photo of the nearest pet to do two things: both annoy them and also get a test photo. Since this camera was released in 2005, I was expecting the photo to be, well, grainy, soft, and have the dynamic range of a microwave screen. Actually, worse. Have you seen the black levels on those things? Anyways, I went and took a look on my laptop and wow. The amount of sharpness, detail, I mean, look at those highlights. They're not even that high. Someone must have snitched. Maybe I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. This is the original Canon 5D, the great-grandfather of the 5D Mark IV. Further proof greatness only lasts 3 generations. It's shockingly similar to modern Canon cameras actually, with the overall grip, layout, buttons, feel, and build quality. It just feels like it was made alongside all the other Canon cameras I've ever used pretty much. It doesn't feel like it's 20 years old at all, which is one major thing I was worried about. This is a camera from 2005, with technology from 2005, which at least I thought would be a giant point of contention. Except, well, Canon knew what they were doing, unlike now. The technology just wasn't there at the time to do anything that crazy with screens and menus and all the features, obviously. So Canon does what Canon does. They made the most basic, simple, easy-to-use menu system possible, with only the entirely necessary options, and made everything you need to adjust often easily adjustable, just looking through the viewfinder, not even going through the screen. And the most important part, they made it responsive, so you don't have to wait for some stupid 2 FPS animation to play through and slow down your entire experience while you're trying to shoot. And I mean, what do you really need to take photos besides white balance, ISO, aperture, shutter speed, I don't know, sensor cleaning if you're into that. In terms of the body, this came from a time after everything was already being made of plastic, but not quite as much plastic as now. And it does have a lot of wear, but it works. And it's built extremely well. I'd say the overall quality is about the same as the 5D too, but this weighs just a little bit more, and it's just a little bit more bulky in the hands, with a pretty similar button layout, and it feels really good in the hands, honestly. I will say though, this combined with the battery grip, which is also made of magnesium, and the EF28-70 f2.8, it just gives you an insanely heavy setup, weighing over 4 pounds, which even holding it in my coffee drinking hand can get pretty tiring. So normally I don't dwell too much on photo quality, mostly because modern cameras just have amazing photo quality, especially full frame cameras. But this isn't exactly a modern camera anymore, which honestly can be hard to notice sometimes. For low light, the max ISO is 1600, and the images at ISO 1600, they're not exactly stellar. So low light isn't amazing, but I will say there's a really interesting aspect to the noise of this lens. It looks oddly pleasing somehow. I wouldn't go as far as to say it's film-like, but it's not quite as offensive as noise is in some modern cameras. I really don't know how to explain it, but I like it. There's not a lot of random, bright colors, and it's really soft, so the noise stands out a lot less. Which that also can help with hiding the lack of resolution, because the image has this nice pleasing grain. You don't really notice the fine details immediately being destroyed into a sharp, blocky mess. They just kind of blend together into a nice pleasing grain. Yeah, sometimes fine details can be missing when you zoom in on the image, but it doesn't feel like the camera's really holding you back. It just feels like the image was designed to be that way. It's odd, but it somehow makes the camera more modern and more vintage at the same time, whatever that might mean. Something that will date this camera though is the dynamic range. It is for sure better than I expected, and a lot better than a lot of APS-C cameras at the time, but it's still not ideal. It's really not that bad, but if you're used to modern cameras where it is really easy to pull the sky back, for example, you might be a little let down. I did notice there is a decent amount of details in the shadows though, so in my experience I just had to underexpose a little bit more than usual, and most of the time I could pull the detail back and have an image with a pretty decent dynamic range considering. You are definitely threading the needle a little bit more than usual though when it comes to dynamic range, but not to the point where I would say it really gets annoying or gets in the way of your photos generally. Oh, And I forgot the color. Yeah, this camera has some beautiful images with really nice colors. I've honestly started taking this when I go places instead of my 5D2 because I just really love how the colors look. I don't have any drawn out poser placebo words to explain the colors. I just find them pleasing. I don't know. The only thing that's a bit of a shame with this camera is with having such an amazing sensor, you can't use it for video at all, even with Magic Lantern. I understand why, but in a way it does keep this camera more simple too. The menus are more tailored to just taking photos, and it kind of keeps you focused on just taking great photos and not being worried about if you want a video or a photo or something and just spending so much time deciding. I know for a lot of people, that is going to be a deal breaker, but it just makes me like the camera even more. Plus, I don't have to talk about Magic Lantern and deal with 50 well actually comments. Thanks, Canon. So the prices are very reasonable and they're not overly inflated. So you can snag these for insane prices. Mine came with 2 OEM batteries, a charger, the camera, and an OEM battery grip for $200. Also, it came with these little things for straps, I don't know. Pair this with either an EF 51.4 or an old zoom, like the 28-70 f2.8, and you have a full frame camera setup with amazing image quality for between $600 and $700. That costs less than my beat up A7S II body alone. That didn't even come with batteries. Came with a charger though. Thanks, eBay seller. Yeah, that does, record video or whatever, but still, and that's around half the price of a 5D2, which after getting the 5D Classic, I'm starting to wonder if I really need a 5D2, or if I should just sell it and start taking this everywhere instead. Yeah, I could be a normal poser and use a Fuji camera, but those full frame pixels. The problem is, with this camera approaching 20 years old, a lot of these are beat up, on their last legs, or just straight up broken. The amount of as-is listings I saw when I was looking for my camera was absolutely insane. Plus, mine even came pretty beat up, which is something I try and avoid when buying something I know I'm going to review, because it just looks bad in the B-roll in my opinion. And if you're cross-shopping with used Canon 5D2s and you're anything like me, you're gonna start to wonder if you should just save up and bite the bullet on a newer camera. Good condition 5D2s regularly sell in $300 to $400 range where I am. And most are in much better shape and use LPE6 batteries, which are much more common and used on much more modern cameras. Not to say this camera isn't amazing or that it's a bad deal or anything like that. It is just something to keep in mind. You are buying an extremely old camera and it could fail at any time, but so could the 5D2. So why am I making this point? I don't know. They're both old cameras. Just keep that in mind when you're purchasing. Normally, I think when you buy a camera, you need to consider all of the options and see what fits you. And I don't want people buying random stuff just to buy it. That's the whole reason I make videos about older and used gear, because it's just not covered as much. But this is the most solid buy out of any camera I've looked at, and I've looked at quite a few now.